You may be seated. I find it awfully uplifting to sing about inviting love and hope to dwell within. Don't you think it's heartening to imagine that we might be the people to embody such strengths? Isn't it beautiful imagery to imagine that we are vessels that can hold truth and light? Like the Shambhala warrior story, I think it's inspiring also to think that people who connect to compassion and spiritual discernment are the very people that are most needed to face forces of devastation. Those are some amazing superpowers. The plan for today is to explore unwrapping of presence. So to begin, I want to be sure that we're unwrapping the same thing. Some years ago, I was presented someone else's view of the meaning of presence. We were having a conversation about the heritage and background that's part of how we are. And the other person said they didn't spend time reflecting on the past because they wanted to have more presence in their life. This caught me by surprise. So I'd like to say up front that spiritual presence doesn't have any relationship to time. I think there's some confusion when we hear that presence can only be found in the present moment, but I just want to say that whenever that moment happens, presence itself is an experience of timelessness. No matter whether we're contemplating the past, the future, or a cup of tea in front of us. We also hear the phrase, resting in the heart is called presence. Again, the emphasis here is not really about a place in the body, it's about a feeling that's experienced. The presence that we're talking about is not a particular point in time and is not a particular place in the body. It's simply an experience, a feeling of joy and possibility, a sense of wonder, openness, and connection. There are many occasions that can spontaneously move us to a centered sense of being. Quiet moments witnessed in nature, times of joyful celebration when we're with loved ones, or maybe a thrilling moment of mastery over some difficult challenge. If we're paying attention when these little gifts of presence show up, all that's going on inside of us is filled with more light. The ability to be aware of what's presenting itself and to sustain the experience of presence is what we cultivate or nurture through what we call spiritual practice. Just like the Shambhala warriors of our reading, insight and compassion are nurtured and grown from intentional and continued practice. There are some deeply gratifying and simple practices that are readily available to everyone. Gratitude, which is a joyful appreciation and wonderment for all that's unfolding. Deep listening, which is a commitment of listening to others with a heart that's welcoming. Making time for stillness, meditation, or practices of mindfulness. Using stillness for contemplation and discernment. Developing a devotion towards knowing and feeling the connection that's shared with others or with all things. All of these practices are taught in many faith traditions, so having them listed here is not new. However, for all of us, there is a rather large obstacle in the way of gaining insight and skill into mind, heart, and spirit. The large obstacle? A lack of commitment. Any one of us can go to the gym or hang out at a swimming pool, but without a planned, disciplined, and effective training program, we don't really grow skills or strengthen our bodies. And so it is with mind and spirit. Without actually committing ourselves to discipline in practice, our skills, our experience with presence doesn't get very far. So maybe what we need is a sense of urgency or necessity for us to undertake the disciplines of mind and heart. Henri Nouwen, a Dutch activist, philosopher, and teacher, wrote simple, straightforward texts about bringing spiritual practice into our lives. The following reading really speaks to me. Spiritual life is not a movement of growing withdrawal, but is instead a movement toward a deeper engagement in the burning issues of our time. A deeper engagement with the burning issues of our time. Too often, our lives become a series of nervous and often anxious reactions to what is going on in our surroundings. We're often very busy and therefore very tired as a result, but we should ask ourselves how much of our reading and talking, our visiting and protesting is an impulsive reaction to the demands of our surroundings rather than an action that's born out of our center. To me, it's really important to know with inner knowledge the difference between action triggered by change in the environment and action that's ripened in our hearts through careful listening to the world in which we live. Ultimately, I see the centered movement as a conversion from an anxious reaction to a loving response. In this observation, I believe no one is addressing the same kind of training that the Shambhala warrior is called to undertake. Proactive compassion and clarity rather than impulsive and anxious reaction. And he asserts that this conversion comes accessible through nurturing our spiritual life. He suggests our discernment is filled out through reflection and contemplation. Otherwise, we end up relying on habitual thinking and our conditioned way of seeing things. For a long time, I've viewed presence, or living out of our center, as a natural fuel for activism. Presence can possess us with a vision, and it naturally draws us away from individualism and into an experience of connection. Presence impels us to not only repair and heal what is fractured and broken, it prods us to see and remake the paradigm, the structure that is creating the fracturing and the brokenness. The more we incline ourselves towards this inner strength, the stronger it tugs at us to become changed and to bring change. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind here that we were living in a time of devastation and actual peril. And yet, I know it's possible to feel that we aren't ready to be called to face the life of a warrior with a conviction of compassion and clarity that needs to be grown and developed in a disciplined practice. Nonetheless, I hope there is one insight that will draw the heart forward. Traditionally, sacrament is understood as a visual representation of what is divine or holy. In your heart lies the wisdom to know that you are a sacrament. You are a visual representation of what is divine and holy. You are a vessel that provides a dwelling place for love, truth, light, and hope to dwell. You are that vessel. In essence, we all carry a gift of presence that continually needs to be unwrapped. It is our great task to uncover this knowledge within us, this knowing, and to then see this truth in every other person that we meet. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be.